Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Chris Cater. I am the manager of customer success at Flockjay, based out of the Atlanta, Georgia, and I am super pumped to be presenting with you all today in our Fly Farther and Faster Together series. And we know that as an objective fact, we do fly further and faster together. Our subject today is going to be celebrating your wins and leveraging your losses. We know how fun it is to celebrate those wins. And multiple musicians have told us, whether through rap, singing, or humming, that losses and L's, they're not a bad thing, they're lessons. And so we're going to talk about that today. All right, now before we dive too deep in, I do have a couple of housekeeping items here before we get really started. I do want to let everyone know that this event is being recorded. I've had the opportunity to speak with our guests many times, and personally, I look forward to learning from them. And now you all get the advantage of learning from them as well, since we're putting this on LinkedIn Live and it's recorded for you to watch again next week and share with your friends and coworkers. We also ask that you come in and engage with us. Our guest has offered that even if you ask a question afterwards, we'd be able to answer that for you as well. So we look forward to engaging and learning together through this experience. So now, without further ado, celebrating your wins and leveraging your losses, I'm going to call up my guests to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about them, personal and professional side. So, my guest Rahul.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris, and it's nice to be here. Good to see everyone. Um, really pumped to be here. I'm currently a product manager at IBM, but prior to that, I was in the technical sales organization for a few years. But I've been an SDR and made a ton of cold calls myself since I was about 16, 17 years old. So I'm well accustomed to celebrating the wins. And to your point, every lesson is a blessing. So, you got to leverage the losses to move forward. So super pumped to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rahul. So let's jump into our first question here. You said it was about 16, 17. How did you get into sales at that age? What did that journey look like?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when I was 16, 17, I was an aspiring musician. I was not very good at it. And I was a self taught guitarist. And so I came up with a software and ran with a startup for a couple of years to try and make it easier for novice musicians to be able to learn music. And I realized through that process, I had to sell to customers, to beta customers, I had to sell to investors. And I realized that I wasn't as confident as I should have been, or I didn't articulate myself as well as I probably should have. And so that was kind of a huge wake up call to say, hey, anything I want to do, and the lesson kind of applied to other facets of my life as well, is that you need to be able to sell, whether it's with friends, whether it's at work, whether it's in school, being able to sell not just a product or an idea or vision, but more so being able to more confidently sell myself was a huge wake up. And that's kind of how the journey into sales started.
That's awesome. So let's continue to walk that journey a little bit because
Yeah.
now you're a product manager. So what did that transition look like to go from selling the software for the musicians and to now being a product manager? What did that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, from the time I was in high school throughout college, I did a few internships, which I was very fortunate to have gotten into. Certain mentors in my life kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, sales is something you can do in a more formalized professional way. So why don't you seek out some internship opportunities? And I was very fortunate to have some amazing mentors at those internships as well, from my direct managers to people on my team who kind of took me under their wing and said, hey, you know, the sales profession is it's really high energy, it's super fun and dynamic, and it's kind of what you make of it. And so there's a lot of deterrence with, oh, you have to cold call people, you have to ask for certain things that might feel socially uncomfortable to do over a phone call. But over time you just develop the confidence and comfort with it, which was super great. And then transitioning out of college, jumped into sales at IBM, which was an amazing start to my career. I'm so fortunate for all of the training I received for about a year, all of the mentorship after there and afterwards. And then kind of the epiphany to switch over to product was outside of selling to customers, which was fantastic. I wanted to learn what it's like to do all types of selling. So as a product manager, I'm selling a vision or a feature or a type of a product internally to multiple different departments and stakeholders, and then also to a customer. So, and it's a different type of sales process and sales cycle. And so it's kind of interesting to see the alignment, not just with a customer, but in-house as well across the functions.
That's such an awesome experience from them tapping you on the shoulder, and then, like you said, you're still selling today.
Yeah.
It's selling is a part of all aspects of our life, and you're still getting the
Mhm.
opportunity to do it now.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. So the next formalized question that we have for you, Rahul, is why is it important for organizations to celebrate wins and losses? Now that you've kind of given us the backstory to your career, we want to jump into some of the things that can really help our listeners. So, why is it important for them?
It's important for many reasons, but to kind of boil it down to just a few general themes. First of which is culture and attitude. If organizations celebrate their wins and losses, it normalizes the sales cycle and sales process so that sales reps or account executives, SDRs, ADRs, everyone feels that there's a safe space for them to be able to open up and get more objective feedback on how to actually improve, as opposed to trying to hide your losses or not really celebrate your wins or recognize the hard effort that went into it. And so when organizations celebrate these wins and losses, it opens up an opportunity for a open culture. And when you have an open culture, to the theme of this, fly farther and fly faster, you're able to, as an organization, fall forward. You can move faster with your mistakes and get closer and closer to hitting your targets, making your sales reps more effective and confident, and actually just spreading your product's message and the value it brings to more and more customers. And so it's extremely pivotal, and there's tons of different ways that are unique to different firms on how they celebrate. And I think that's kind of the beauty of being in tech or being in the sales culture is every single firm and even different teams within the same firm celebrate these things differently. And that's the beauty of it, is you can create a very personalized experience for the members of one specific sales team that makes them feel like they have skin in the game and this is something they're a part of.
I love that. Let's sit here for just a second because we're kind of talking about the organizational impact of celebrating the wins and losses. You were mentioning how the entire organization and company can fall forward together. In your experience, what are some ways that you've seen to where one part of the organization having this positive culture can positively impact other parts of the organization, even if they don't directly work together all the time?
Absolutely. And, the first is probably attitude, right? Attitude is contagious and positivity can be contagious. And so if you're in a sales team or even in a different department of your organization and you have this type of culture where you celebrate the things that went well and even the things that didn't go well, because it's an opportunity to improve and improve quickly, other organizations or other departments will be able to notice it, right? Any engagement a sales team has with a marketing team or an operations team, development or finance, whoever it is, every other function and field will notice it. It's a behavior and it's an attitude. And so, in addition to kind of celebrating the ups and the downs, you'll also notice that the overall outcome improves, whether that's target, you achieve your quotas much faster, you have a higher attainment rate, you have a consistent base of, hey, maybe instead of 50% of our reps hit their number, 70 to 80% do. And those kind of not just behavioral changes, but financial and impacting kind of changes are well noticed regardless of, what department someone sits in.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And as we kind of paint the picture for the rest of the session, a very important question came in from the audience, and someone wanted to know which product are you a PM for?
Oh, awesome. That's a great question. I'm a PM for the Cognos Analytics product, Cognos Analytics with Watson at IBM. It's an enterprise reporting and dashboard solution. And so I'm really excited. I cover data science, so a lot of the notebooks and data analytic tools that are required for the product, as well as competitive strategy as well. But that's a great
Awesome.
question. And that if that listener has further questions or further specific questions about it, more than happy to take it offline as well.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that definition too, because when you first said it, I was like, I have no clue
Yeah.
what part of the product you're talking about. But thanks for for sharing more.
Yeah, of course, man.
That's awesome. Okay, so thank you for sharing that rule about how us as individuals, regardless of what part of organizations that we're in, you were sharing that our attitude is one of the major things that can have an impact, a broader impact upon different organizations. Once again, even if we don't directly work together, that's a
Mhm.
big part of it. So,
Exactly.
Our next question here is, what are some common challenges that you saw that can prevent early career salespeople from sharing their wins and losses? So, what keeps
Yeah,
us from sharing those things?
that's a great question, and it's interesting. Over the last couple of years, I've heard very varied answers, but kind of the general themes that I've noticed for people who don't like sharing their wins is they feel like they're bragging. They don't want it to come across as better than someone else or something like that. They don't want to slip up that, hey, I've done a really good job, and if I broadcast how well I've done, then the bar is set a little higher, and I don't want to disappoint someone in the next quarter or for my next attainment, right? And then third is people may not feel comfortable knowing how to say it. The whole concept of a humble brag or a community driven achievement um, is perhaps hard for some people, and so they don't know how to say it, and because they don't know how to frame the win or know how to kind of disperse credit to say it wasn't just them, it was a whole team of people, and thanking everyone in the process, they might not know how to orient themselves with that process just yet. And so that's another reason people kind of don't want to share the wins. And I've been subject to that before, where there was a win and I just didn't know how to congratulate other people, let alone kind of say that it was a good thing. And so, definitely something I've worked on and I've figured out for myself. But it's unique to each person's personality and what they feel comfortable saying. Kind of on the losses front, I think that's the harder one. Is that people definitely don't want to share the losses, which is, no one wants to feel that kind of public ridicule. There's a stigma surrounding losing. No one wants to be losing a deal or not hitting a quota or attaining some goal. And so ridicule is one, or feeling like they're not doing well. And then the next kind of ones were just stress moving forward, right? And so it's all about, okay, even if I talk about this loss, I don't want that to color anyone's judgment of how I'm going to perform in the next quarter or the next half, right? So it's instead of being descriptive of what's already happened, people don't want to bring it up because they don't want their manager or anybody else saying, hey, we need to tap them on the shoulder and give them a little extra attention. No one wants to be micromanaged, or no one wants that kind of water cooler whisper around the office saying, hey, this person didn't hit their quota and who knows if they'll hit it again next quarter. Right. So, and that's something that, most salespeople do feel at some point. And hopefully, by having an open culture and celebrating both the wins and losses, specifically losses in stride, um, we can kind of normalize, hey, it's okay to lose. Everyone loses at some point. By talking about it, you can accelerate your path to winning again, right? By hiding your losses and not sharing it, not only does it kind of perhaps deter you from learning from it for yourself and getting some feedback, but perhaps, if I lost a deal and I don't share what happened, maybe there's someone else in my organization going through the exact same process, and I want to help prevent them from also losing out on a deal, right? So it's not just about yourself. And if sales leaders can kind of cultivate that message where everyone feels that it's not just about themselves and sharing a loss, it's, hey, I want everyone to be aware of it, I don't want anyone else to slip up or make the same mistake I did, right? Then we're moving towards a more efficient and positive organization.
I love all of that, and I want to deep dive on a few things that you said. Let's start
Sure.
with the one that's a little bit easier to share with the win.
Sure.
Um, I want to peek into your brain a little bit, Rahul, because you
Sure.
are successful, and I love hearing your experience. You were talking about how it can be harder to share those wins because the stigma that comes with being that person who humble brags or raising the expectations and feeling like you may not get there next quarter. Ro, help us out. How do we overcome that feeling of of feeling like I'm a little shy on sharing this, or I'm a little afraid? How can we change our mindsets?
Absolutely. And there's a couple of techniques that I've done that work for me. And again, it's subject to every person who's different. The first is deciding the medium. So whether you are a really good writer, which I'm not the best writer, I'm more of a verbal person, figuring out the medium in which you want to celebrate that win is crucial. Whether it's in person, it's on a Slack channel or email, or it's on a video call, whatever feels most comfortable to you, that's where you should start. And then second is you succeed together and you fail alone is kind of how I view it. So for celebrating wins, I try and think back, okay, for this deal, every single person that was associated with it on my side as well as the client side, they're going to be mentioned in this, right? It was not just me. It was not just me and one other person. Everyone deserves some fair share of the credit. And by kind of dispersing it, and it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to mention the, the different equity distribution of how much someone was involved or not. If they were attached to it in any way, shape, or form, you include them in the process, right? And so by sharing that it wasn't me or someone individually, it was all of us, it makes it easier to share because then you're just the messenger. Then you're just the messenger saying, hey, our team did a really good job. And I just want to be the one to let everyone know, since no one else is saying it, I just want to congratulate everyone and tell everyone how proud I am of the rest of the team for that win. And, for a loss, it's more of, okay, maybe it was a collective, process that was wrong, but it's more so that's when you take ownership and you don't point the finger at anyone. You kind of say, hey, this is what didn't work as a process, and here's what I, as an individual sales rep or individual product manager, am going to do differently to try and make it better. And I guess the key distinction is to make sure that whether it's a win or a loss, you congratulate the people and you recognize that it was a process in place that did well. It wasn't one person's ability or not. So if it is a loss, it doesn't seem like it's, oh, it's this person. It's the process just didn't work. And when you can detach, a person from a process, it takes away any of the emotion behind it and a lot of the fear that you might have sharing that loss. And so for me, when I make a mistake in sales or in product, I analyze what the process was, and I'm blessed that my manager and my PM team know that it isn't a personal thing. It is a process driven issue. And we kind of workshop it from there, which has been absolutely fantastic.
I'm so glad that you shared that. Dropping more keys than DJ Khaled right there, Rahul, because like you said, when it comes to those wins, you're a culture add to any company when you can start to build a culture of sharing that win with
Mm-hmm.
everyone, because then they'll probably start to do it too. Like that just becomes the
Yeah.
thing when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
win is celebrating together and then, like you were saying, when it comes to those losses, realizing that, hey, we can learn from it, and here's what happened, and not internalizing or personalizing it. It's saying, okay, this is what happened in the process, and here's how we can adjust the process to make it even better next time.
Exactly. Exactly.
I love it. So our next formal question here is, what advice do you have for sales leaders on how to create a culture that celebrate wins and losses? So we started talking a little bit about the individual contributors. We started talking about how each person can do things and how you've done things in your career. What's your advice for the leaders?
Awesome. No, and it's again, it'll be subject to different leaders on their style, but to me, it stems from as a sales leader, you set the tone. Everyone is looking to you for guidance on not just how, how the culture should be, but where you want it to go from there. And so as a sales leader, if you can establish this kind of normalized culture where as a sales leader, you open up and you're vulnerable to say what your losses were and what your wins were, right? People like talking about the wins, they don't talk about the losses, right? And I always joke about it with my friends where we see these posts about, investors, even like Robinhood investors saying, oh, I made huge returns, but no one talks about the losses, right? You don't
Yeah.
know what that journey looks like for someone to achieve those wins. And so to better appreciate each person on the team, if the sales leader can say, hey, here are some of the losses that I've had, and I want to make sure I share that with all of you so that, if you feel like you're in a similar situation, you reach out to me so we can work through it and try and prevent that mistake from happening again. So the first is transparency. If the leader can demonstrate that they're willing to share, it makes everyone else feel more comfortable. Number two is communication platforms. So, whether it's creating a Slack channel to celebrate all the wins, or a channel called Workshop for all of the deals that have been lost and kind of how we want to move forward. Storing all of that knowledge and all of that feedback somewhere is crucial for anyone who's just joining the firm or people who just forget at times, right? I forget myself and I have to refer
Yeah.
back to documentation. And so, kind of cementing it in that this is a daily practice or a weekly practice. This isn't just a every once in a while let's talk about a win or a loss. It is a frequent cadence and it's part of a sales culture's hygiene. It makes it so much easier. It'll normalize talking about it, and that's by far the first step to creating that successful culture.
Oh, yeah, yeah. To make sure everyone got that, because that was amazing. You're right. It can start with the leader creating that culture and them doing it themselves,
Mm-hmm.
talking about their wins and their losses, creating that transparency. But then also, I like what you said at that latter part too, is having a place to store it. That
Mhm.
way we can come back and, as you said, it's a cadence where it doesn't just live 6 months ago where we saw Rahul do something cool. We can come back
Right.
and point back to it.
Exactly. And
So
I think being able to establish that, and Chris, I know you come from the customer success background, right? And so
yeah,
I know you want to see your customers win. And so, it's a great way for you to celebrate that win. If you have access to it too, you can celebrate with the sales team, you can celebrate with the CSM team, and then you can also loop in the customer and celebrate with them too, right? Because it was a group effort to get everyone to the table and make sure something productive and valuable comes of it. And so it's just, again, like your first question, how does that sales culture spread to other parts that aren't necessarily connected? If everyone's being included in the wins and the losses and getting some credit and feeling valued and recognized for it, then there's going to be more engagement. And the more engagement you get, the easier it is to make it into like a every week kind of cadence where people are willing to share.
yeah, and I want to stay here for one more follow-up question before we go to the next one, because I
Yeah.
do really appreciate how we're talking about the storing of that information, because I've seen some companies where they create the wins channel, and that's amazing to have it there. But one of the parts that really struck me is about how important it is to come back to it and not let losses be forgotten from the standpoint of remembering why it was lost, or don't let wins be forgotten from the standpoint of knowing why we won, because that's really important.
Yep.
Bro, could you share? Is there a certain experience that you have that you can share with us where you were able to point back to something that happened in the past? And in this question, it could be whether you learned from a win, from a how to
Mhm.
do something, or learn from a loss on how not to do something. Are there
Yeah.
any experiences that you can think about where you personally were able to reach back and into one of those
Yeah.
wins or losses?
No, absolutely. And this was again kind of the team experience that I experienced, a few years ago, where I was on a sales team and I was supporting a account executive. I was a SDR equivalent, and we lost one of the deals, and my account executive was clearly upset, obviously, and as was I. And what we kind of noticed was that our performance had been dipping for a little bit. It wasn't just one deal. We had been underperforming for about a month or so, give or take, right? And leveraging those losses, we were very grateful that our CEO of all people kind of figured out what was happening and found out that, hey, here's something wrong with your process. I want you to try this differently. And kind of what makes this memory, this was about 6 years ago, sticks out in my mind as a good leader, not just a sales leader, but leader in general, was he found out what was stressing out our account executive. And at a personal level, he was starting a family and he was looking for a house and he couldn't get it. He couldn't get a house. He couldn't find a house. He couldn't buy a house. And the CEO said, that's why there's so much stress built up. You're connecting this particular month's paycheck and commission to the ability to purchase a home for yourself. And so, without any prompting, our CEO, after work, basically printed out a bunch of homes, found a real estate agent, got them in contact, and helped our account executive buy a home. Right. And this was not in any way connected. He didn't say anything about his performance at work. He just said, hey, look, I'd be stressed too if I was in that position. Let me help you out so you can be more comfortable and you're not stressing out about two things. Let's solve the bigger priority, which was he had a personal issue that he wanted to get a house. And as soon as he closed on that house, at work, things started skyrocketing, right? So, not just at a process level did things change based on the feedback we received, but the attitude changed. He was more hungry, he was aggressive, and he was also just more confident. And he felt good knowing that the big personal thing that was weighing on his mind was not just kept to himself, but the fact that a sales leader or our CEO had his back. It was a forever memorable experience. And it's funny enough, I caught up with that CEO last week after about 4 years, and I told him that was a story that stuck with me. And it's these kinds of stories where it can't live in a Slack channel or an email or you read about it. These are the stories that people tell you to get you excited about a company or a culture, right? Our CEO had our back in a very personal way that mattered to us, as well as in a professional way. And kind of when you marry the two together as a sales leader, if you can demonstrate that level of investment in your sales teams, just at a process driven level, but also at a personal level, things will start to improve.
We're grateful for you sharing that experience, because, like you said, that is marrying kind of the allowing you to be your best self along
Hmm.
with having a good process, right? Like that's a
Yeah.
that's a really great marriage.
Yeah, no, it was awesome, man. It was truly a great experience, and I think that was kind of the most memorable. But along the way, right, wins and losses. I think the really cool thing is having what we call a post-mortem. If you lose a deal, it's what killed the deal. Was there one particular thing that stopped the deal, or were there multiple factors involved? And being able to have kind of a Zoom call or a WebEx call with your sales leaders and perhaps any other stakeholders, and just get everyone's perspective. Right, the reason I think a deal went bad or didn't close might be different from someone else's, and it's beneficial to detail and note all of those different opinions so that moving forward you're not capturing just one angle to it. You capture the same deal loss or deal win from multiple different lenses.
Yeah, and what one of the big takeaways I just got from that is how you're saying capturing it, because if a sales leader is not aware of how deals are closing, right? Like how could they give a cure to something that they're not sure is happening, right? Like if you're not aware
Right.
of the symptoms. So that you have to be able to share those losses, so that way the manager can see, oh, there seems to be a pattern here, or we're losing this type of way every time.
Right.
Let's solve for X. So
Exactly. Exactly.
we wouldn't know if it's not shared out or notated or documented or shared in any way. We wouldn't be able to find that.
Exactly. And a lot of it is also just, to dive deeper on that, it's the knowledge transfer itself, right? Sometimes in the same company, sales reps will move to different territories, they'll move to different teams, they'll leave the company and come back, there'll be new people joining. And so by having this documentation or having this kind of content either stored at a recording level, if it's a verbal, or in a Slack channel or an email or some sort of knowledge base, it makes it easier for new reps to ramp up. It makes it easier for transitioning reps within the same company to better understand a territory or better understand the dynamic or sentiment shared with one of the clients or that book of business. And it's also just easier from an administrative executive level as a leader to be able to find the root cause, right? Like you mentioned, if you don't know the symptoms, it could be wrong. You could have the wrong diagnosis and then you're treating the wrong problem.
Exactly. And that also pointed to something else you said earlier about it being the process that helps to win. Because when you're transitioning that person out, you don't have to no longer worry about, oh no, I'm losing my best person. It's like, well, no,
Yeah,
we have this process now. We can put this person in and here we go. We're going to follow that process and still get results.
exactly. Exactly.
Ah, awesome. I see how you kind of like tied it back in. I like that, Earl.
Man, that was all you. You tied it for me, so I appreciate that.
And I know I said one follow up question. I asked like five afterwards. So thanks for
You're
letting me
good.
me deep dive on that one.
No, you're good, man. No, it's worth it. Absolutely.
All right, the next question we have here is: given your heavy focus on analytics in your career, how do you
Mhm.
quantify the business impact of those efforts?
That's a good question. And so, there's quantifying and qualifying. And so some quantifying measures to measure this would be, one is you'll just notice it in your revenue numbers. So more reps will start attaining their quota. You'll see better deal flow and lead generation from your sales development teams or account development teams, right? So outside of the normal sales health kind of metrics, what you'll also notice is efficiency. You'll notice that your daily output from your sales reps or your daily or weekly output from your account executives has been increased, right? They're meeting with more customers. They're able to send out more emails. They are more motivated to kind of go after it. And kind of, I guess, more on the qualitative side, maybe not as tied to the top line revenue, is you'll notice that there is a increase in employee retention and employee engagement, right? Salespeople, and this was true for myself, which is why I was very lucky to be at IBM, was whether it was a win or a loss, I felt recognized, right? And whether I lost, I felt recognized, and it was an opportunity to improve. And when we won, I felt recognized for it. And so, and that is what partially kept me here was, hey, I'm at least feeling valued for the work that I'm doing, whether I win or lose. I'm still there and I'm still a part of the team, and I feel valued as a team member, not just by the number I bring in or the number I don't bring in, which was super nice. And that employee retention also kind of backtracks into just engagement, not on the efficiency or productivity standpoint, but just engagement in terms of, you'll notice that the kind of conversations that reps have with each other, or the kinds of discussions that live inside your communication channels like Slack, it's more fun and lighthearted. It's not all work. There's some, memes in there. There's some funny jokes. People are joking around with each other and having a good time, while at the same time being very focused, laser focused on their task at hand or achieving their goals. And it just makes it a more fun environment. Like you'll notice it on both ends: quantifiable business health metrics, qualified employee health, and kind of culture aspects as well.
Yeah, and that latter part is super important too, because I don't think that there will be any webinar or workshop within the next few years that will not have the pandemic somewhere in it and its
Yeah.
impact and effects on our workplace. And so, as a follow up question to some of the things that you were just saying, have you noticed any changes or impacts that us working more remote together, or us not being able to sit next to each other and tell those jokes, or share some of those things, how
Mhm.
that had how's that impacted our results?
Absolutely. And the pandemic, for better or for worse, when it comes to communication, it kind of forced a lot of people to be more digital with a lot of their relationships, right? You're not traveling to see anyone, or you're not in office, like you said, next to someone that you can chat with. Um, you know, what that meant was the cultures that really succeeded, it had to come from leadership. The leaders had to demonstrate, okay, we have cameras on, we are making an effort to make this more fun and engaging, whether that's, Hawaiian shirts or funny hats, or, hosting different types of cultural, events, whether it's celebrating different holidays or having a comedy show, happy hours, those kinds of events, right? It, it has to come somewhere, because if it's just digital and it just seems like work, um, kind of there's this lacking of that community feeling, right? People don't feel as open to talk about it if they realize, okay, if I log into work every single day and I'm at home and we don't talk about anything but work, I'm not going to stay on longer or I'm not going to share some of the things that I would have. And in times like the pandemic, where a lot of people went through certain different, both professional and personal hardships, it became a necessity basically to host these types of events and demonstrate, as a leader, you are there and present minded, emotionally, professionally, and at work for your entire team, right? If and this was something that happened where, um, throughout the pandemic, my sales manager, who we're still actually really good friends, he anytime something happened where someone had an unfortunate circumstance with COVID, or was scared of it, or had a family member or friend that they knew of, he would make it a personal point to give them a call. He'd give them a call on his own time. He called me on the weekend when I had people that I knew who fell ill with COVID or something like that, and he just checked in on me. He didn't make it seem like work. It seemed very natural and intuitive, and you could tell that,
Yeah.
hey, he actually thought of me. He was thinking of me this week when he found out this news. And so, setting that tone of, hey, we're all here to work and work towards our goals, but more important than that, I'm here for you as a person. I'm here for whatever you're going through at work, at home, whatever health problems you're working through, I'm also here for it. And that was a huge source of confidence and comfort for me throughout the pandemic. Was anytime I felt stressed, or I felt ill myself, or I felt like I was sick, he'd call me on the weekend and we'd chat for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and he'd just say,
Yeah.
very affectionately and caringly, hey, go take your medicine, try and rest, don't do any work, don't do this, like just take the time for yourself. And he went up above and beyond to, even at some point when he didn't think I was taking certain vitamins or eating the right kind of stuff, he'd just send me food. He'd just order me food and send it to me, and he's like, look, man, I know you don't like salads, but you need to eat one. So it was it just demonstrated a different level of care, and because of that, I'm even more loyal to the company and to him as well.
Yeah, which touches on what you were saying, is that feeling can then have that impact on those more quantifiable things,
Hmm.
like the metrics, because I was feeling better at work, even though there's
Yeah,
these things happening. Yeah, thank you
exactly.
for sharing that experience with us as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and now touching on a little bit more current times in your product management career right now.
Mhm.
Now that you're in product management, how does your sales experience help you in your current role? You touched on it a little bit at the beginning of the call, but if you could share a little bit more about how sales helps you today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of the three or four things. The first was listening. Second was seeking advice. Third is confidence. And it kind of goes hand in hand. altogether. Where in sales, you're listening to customers, you're trying to empathize, and you're trying to be very precise with how acute your listening is. Where you're actively listening, but you're also proactively listening, right? You're trying to think ahead of the customer to try and anticipate their needs and what they're looking for. And in product, whether that's the features that customers want to see built, or it's features that are already under development and potential pitfalls with it, or potential, opportunities that we haven't capitalized on. It basically said, hey, coming from sales, I learned this skill set, and now I can apply it internally, inward facing to the product team, marketing, finance, etc. And it doesn't have to be just to customers, which, to be quite frank, I think a lot of salespeople who do pivot into product management will have this skill, and it's a huge asset to have, because it is overwhelming at times with all of the different teams and people you coordinate with. So being able
Yeah.
to proactively listen and really understand kind of the sentiment of what's going on here in a fast moving environment where you have multiple calls back to back, there's a lot of context switching where for an hour you're talking about finance, the next hour is marketing, the next hour is coding. You don't really have the time to prep for each one, the way you might in sales. And so having that ability to proactively listen and just anticipate has been a huge benefit to me. And because of that, it's kind of helped me develop that confidence that if I have to deliver, a roadmap presentation or demo a product for a customer, I'm comfortable in front of a customer, and I got that because of sales. I understand how to deal with customers that are upset and how to handle the situation and not get too emotional. So that was kind of a huge, initial concern for me was, oh man, now I'm not just selling a product or, the benefits. I'm selling every aspect of it as a product manager. I'm explaining how the pricing works. I'm explaining why marketing is the way it is. Why isn't it built this way? So instead of being on the sales side where it's like, hey, look at what we did, now I'm selling, okay, here's why we didn't do something and here's what's going to happen moving forward. And so that was kind of a really, pivotal transition for me. And lastly was salespeople in general, I find, do an amazing job of asking good questions. They're very curious, then they're very, very good at not just asking for, customers, but 360-degree kind of feedback. So asking people on their team, asking people in different tangential functions or above them as well. And I think that in product management, now that the sphere of who I work with is kind of expanded, being able to ask for advice is definitely what's helped out. And I'm blessed that, all the PMs on my team, my PM manager and VP as well, I can ask them for advice on anything work related, different aspects I'm trying to build out, different features, or just in general, how to improve myself as a PM. How do I change the way I think about certain things or deliver certain presentations? And everyone's there for it. Everyone's willing to give me feedback, which is fantastic. And it's that ability to say, okay, I'm starting here and I want to go here. In order to do that, I need to fly farther and with other people, right? And the more people you involve in that process, the easier it becomes to get the feedback needed to improve.
Oh man, nah, I love it so much, and thank you for including that such a cool tagline about flying further and us going faster together. We appreciate that. So that was it for the formal questions, and Ro, you got some questions from the audience as well that we want to make sure that we get to. So a couple of
Awesome.
questions that I see here is, do you have any tips on how to find a company or a sales leader with the qualities you mentioned when interviewing?
That's a great question. So, there's a few different ways. And again, it's subject to vary based on the company. But first is if you're looking at a sales leader on LinkedIn or on their digital presence, try to be observant and see what kind of content they're posting. Are they, posting videos of themselves celebrating their team? Are they very active or not? Talking about topics that matter most to you at a personal level as well. Whether that's be mental health or taking self care or trying to make sure you have a strong work life balance. And so you can kind of have um, you know, a hint as to how a sales leader is in person or what it would be like to work with them based on what they post and what their digital footprint is. And then second is, when you ask other people at that company, what do you think of this sales leadership or what's something you would change, right? And you ask a sales rep, an account executive, maybe a sales development, manager, take what they say into account and say, hey, how does the leadership kind of flow work? Are they available to you? Right. So a lot of that is actually qualifying a company like a lead, where you ask them questions such as, what does feedback look like? How do I get feedback as a sales rep? What processes are set in place for me to get the support I need to succeed and hit my quota, or to just achieve whatever goal was set for me? And when you ask other people about a sales leader and say, hey, what's something that you really like about this company? You'll be able to tell. You'll see people's, eyes and ears perk up. They'll say, oh, he's a great leader. He's available. He's there for us. He brings high energy and he's understanding. Right. And so a lot of these great sales leaders are fantastic teachers, as are a lot of the people coming out of Flockjay. They learn from the best, and, such as yourself, Chris, and Bryant, and the rest of the team. And so, that's kind of the second layer. So the first is digital footprint. Second is kind of qualifying questions. And then third is just your own personal gut feeling when you talk to that sales leader during an interview. How do you feel? Do you feel motivated? Do you feel inspired? Do you feel like, do you feel pressured? Do you feel a little bit of stress or tension? Right? Depending on how you feel based on your interaction, you'll know if that sales leadership style is right for you. Right? So even if the footprint looks good and, what people say is great, you might realize that, hey, maybe there's, some room for improvement, or maybe I can communicate with this leader a little differently so we can make this work and make it mutually beneficial. And so, for me, it's always, do I have the comfort level to approach the sales leader and tell them anything personal in my life? If something's stressing me out at a personal level that might impact my performance at my job, I like having that. Just a personal opinion. I like having that, openness where I can tell my PM manager or a sales leader, "Hey, I'm really going through something, or I need some time, to myself or to my family to attend to certain things." And being comfortable enough to say that to them and know that they're supportive of it, and, more so than that, they'll ask about it. They'll ask if they can help. I've had sales managers before offer to fly out to California because they said, hey, if you need me, I'll be on a flight and I'll be there for you. And so kind of having that level of commitment from a leader, it's really, really crucial, because you know that you're going to be learning from them and you're kind of going on their ship. And so, those are the kind of three tiers of how to identify those companies. But if there's more specific nuances or a specific use case that listener had, feel free to reach out and we can kind of, again, it's case by case, so we can take it from there.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'll be one of those people reaching out, so don't,
Yeah,
be
you
ready for
got it,
my
man.
messages too. One last question here. One of the listeners wants to know: are there any resources like books or etc. that you would recommend for professional development?
That's a good question. So it's pretty broad with professional development, I guess more tailored to sales in general. A book that I really like is called Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. And so it kind of just helps explain that very premise, right? Talking to strangers, talking to people you may not know, right? It's inevitable that when anyone starts a job or a new job, they might know some people, one or two people through referrals or their network or from school, but there's a greater chance that you don't know people at your company or at your customer than you do. And so that's been a really interesting book, in terms of how to upskill yourself in sales. And then another book, I guess, that has kind of helped me out was it was called Bounce by Matthew Syed, Syed. It's actually, believe it or not, it's a sports psychology type book where he identifies a lot of mental and mindset patterns that a lot of high performing athletes and artists, political leaders, everybody that shares. And, from Federer to Picasso, he kind of analyzes a lot of their mindset. And that was something really beneficial to me. Um, you know, so that was pretty cool. And then I guess the third one, and this kind of goes back to how do you identify if this sales leader or this company is right for you. There's a book called The Happiness Advantage, and it has 7 different principles of how you can, derive and kind of arrive at the best case happiness situation, and different principled approaches on how you can find happiness in different aspects of your life. And that was extremely critical for me, not just at work, but just in my personal life too. And so I guess those 3 books: one on mindset, which was Bounce; one on upselling this, upskilling, which was Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell; and then third was The Happiness Advantage, which just helps you kind of come to terms and come to peace with where you are in your career and where you can move forward, and kind
Yeah.
of take it step by step. And since I've read that book, even my stressful worst days, one of those principles ends up working and applying, where I'm like, man, these are problems that I'd like to have. It's a privilege for me to have these problems, and I can view it in this particular lens. And so those are the three books that I'd recommend. And if there's a different specific topic that the listener had in mind, more than happy to find some more resources for you.
Well, thank you so much. I know that everyone can see now why I was looking forward to this, to learn from you and in this conversation. That ends all of our questions. Once again, thank you so much, Rahul, for joining us and sharing your experiences, knowledge, and wisdom with everyone out there listening.
Awesome. No, Chris, my pleasure, man. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who joined to listen. Please feel free to reach out if you have further questions. More than happy to be of service. And yeah, if I don't get to speak with everyone sooner, I wish you all a very happy 4th of July weekend.
All right. Thank you so much. And to everyone out there, thank you. And you all have a great one.
All right.